This is the Strataflex crimp machine. It's not a very difficult piece of machinery to use. As a matter of fact, with the right tools, it can be a lot easier than you may think. So you might as well start with the right tools and accessories. A can of Molykote GN paste, something to apply the Molykote with, like a brush or clean rag, a caliper gauge, and a Marks-a-Lot or a grease pencil. And here's the most important part, the Strataflex Process Specifications book. Why is this so important? Because it has the crimp data forms in it, which will tell you things like how to determine your hose length, what type of crimp style you'll need, how much skiving you need, or if it'll be needed at all, and how hard to crimp your hose. So, the Process Specifications book is something that you'll need to have handy all the time so that you can look back at it when you need to. It might even be a good idea to post the book near the machine so that everyone can find it easily. Now, most of the time, you're going to be replacing a hose. So first, figure out what type of hose it is that you need to install. Most of the time, it's going to be a 4240. After you've picked out the hose, turn to the Process Specifications book to find the right crimp data form for that hose. Once you've found the right crimp data form, keep this page handy because all the information you need to know can be found on this one page. So we've got hose number 4240. See the number embossed right on the hose along with its dash size. Now let's say the dash size on this hose is 8. From here you need to go back to the Process Specifications book and look up the crimp data form for that hose, number 4240-8. The information we're looking for is in the section labeled page 104 through 193. We'll need to go back to this page in order to prepare the hose for crimping, but first we need to cut it off to the right length. Now there's a wrong way to do this too, so you'd better learn the right way. Put a mark on the hose with a Marks-a-Lot or a grease pencil where you want to cut it. Then all you do is place the hose in the cutoff machine and make sure to put it behind the holding pins. This way you'll get a straight cut. And keep the right tension on the hose so that it doesn't bind on the blade. Watch this, a smooth, continuous motion. That's the way to do it. If you try to force it, you'll buckle the hose, and if you're using an abrasive type blade, it could damage the blade or even crack it. Here's something to remember. Never put the hose in the machine while it's running, and always make sure that the blade guard is securely in place. And since we're talking about safety, there's one more thing. You should always wear protective goggles when you're cutting a hose. Remember, these hoses are made up with reinforcement wire, and it's possible for a piece of that wire to break off and fly up and hit you in the eye. And that could be very dangerous, if you see what I mean. Now when you've finished cutting the hose, take it off the cutting machine and check to make sure that you get a smooth, even cut. Also make sure that it's a flat cut. You've only got a 0 to 6 degree tolerance on these cuts. When you check the cut end of your hose, if it has more than a 6 degree angle, then you've got to cut it again until you get a good straight cut. After you've done this, then you've got to skive the hose. Here's where the crimp data form from the Process Specifications book comes in handy. If you look on the crimp data form, there's a column labeled Skive Length. For the hose we're using, the dash size is 8. And we see that in the skive length column, it shows us that our skive length needs to be 1.790, give or take 0.020. To skive the hose, we use a buffer, which is attached to and is part of the cutoff machine. See on the inside here, there are a bunch of mandrels. And on the side, there's a pin which you can pull out, and it'll allow you to rotate the mandrels. After you've picked out the size mandrel you need, replace the pin and put the hose on the mandrel. Now, on the inside, there's a small adjustment knob which you turn to set the skive length you need. Once everything's set up, you turn on the machine, and it'll automatically buff off the top layer of the hose. One more thing, there's an adjustment lever here, which you can turn to buff off more of the outer rubber. Another way to skive a hose is to measure the length out on the hose and set the hand-operated skiving tool to that point. Then place the tool on the hose and rotate the tool until the first layer of rubber is removed. Remember, we only want to remove the rubber until we've exposed the reinforcement wire. Now here you might need to buff the hose a little to remove the extra rubber from the reinforcement wire. One more thing, the skive length is very important, because if you overskive the hose, you might leave the reinforcement wire exposed, and that can cause it to corrode. This is a big problem because your hose could wear out a lot quicker than normal, and if that happens, you'll have to take the time to fit another hose, and that means downtime, which can cost the company a lot of money. Nobody wants that. Now, after you've got that cleaned off, read the hose wall thickness. You can do this by using the caliper gauge and measuring the distance from the inside of the hose to the outside of the reinforcement wire. Do it in a couple of places, but be sure your checks are 180 degrees apart. Let's say we measure it and it reads .208 at both places. Now to check the crimp data form. Wait a minute, there's not a column called hose wall thickness. But there is one labeled double hose wall thickness. So to get the double hose wall thickness, we just add the two readings together and we get .416. Keep this number handy because you'll need it later to find out what your crimp diameter is going to be. Now we're ready to put that connection on. It'll be tight, but it's made that way to make a good seal. If you're having trouble fitting the connection onto the hose, here's what you can do. Lubricate the inside of the hose with some motor oil and then rotate the connection onto the hose, but be careful not to unravel the reinforcement wire. Rotate the hose in the direction that the wire is laid. It might take some time to get this done, but be patient, you'll get it. We don't recommend that you use any type of hammer or mallet to force the connection onto the hose. And don't go hitting it on a table or the floor either, or you'll damage the connection. Now to get the right size connection. All you need to do is turn to the process specifications book and the crimp data forms. Look in the upper right-hand corner. See the box? That gives us the hose we're using, in this case a 4240, and right below the hose number it tells us what number socket we need to have. Here we see that we need socket number 1148. Now we're ready to get the crimp machine set up for crimping. We've got to do this right because it could mean the difference between having a good crimped connection and having to do this whole thing over again. First, we've got to choose the right jaws and the crimp style for the hose we're getting ready to use. One more time, it's back to the process specifications book and crimp data forms again. You'll see that in the column called Jaws, under the dash size we're using, the jaws we need are -8. The other number we'll need from this column is the number right below the word jaws. In our case, it's TO8-150J13. So, we need to find the jaws numbered TO8-150J13-8. And all 8 jaws should have the same number on them. Also on this same sheet, in the upper right-hand corner, under the hose and socket number, you'll find the crimp style we'll be using is style E. From here, you put the jaws into the machine with the bottom 4 jaws going in first. Put them in from the inside and make sure that the angle of each jaw matches the angle of the crimp head. Now for the top jaws. First, take off the crimp jaw guard. Then insert the top 4 jaws. Again, make sure that the angle of each jaw matches the angle of the crimp head. Watch these small pins on the side of these top 4 jaws. The pins go into a spring-loaded hole on the crimp head. These are here to help make sure that the jaws go in right. And remember, the jaw guard is there to protect the jaws. So if it's not in place, something could happen, like the jaws could get jammed on the crimp head plate and damage the head plate or the jaws. It might even cause the master bushing to jam and force the pressure back and crack the webbing. Okay, now for the next step. You'll need to lubricate the jaws and the head plate. And if the machine is going to be used for any length of time, sort of keep a watchful eye on the jaws and head to make sure they've always got plenty of lubrication. Then, an insert bushing should be placed on the master bushing. For most hoses, a solid-faced insert bushing is what's needed. This will act as a stop plate for the nipple when it's put into the machine. Then, you need to install the master bushing. Sometimes the crimp data form will say that a mandrel is needed to put into the hose when you're crimping so that the hose won't collapse when you're crimping it. Take our hose, for example. It shows us that we need mandrel T08-119M4-8 to crimp the fixture to the hose. When we're using a mandrel, it's necessary to get an insert bushing with a hole in it so that the mandrel can pass through while the crimping is going on. The bushing needs to be big enough to just barely allow the mandrel to pass through it. Now we put the fixture in the crimp head. Hold the stop gauge lever open and jog the control valve lever to close the crimp jaws on the socket just enough to make an imprint. Back it off and measure it from the inside of the nipple hex to the top of the imprint. This is called A. You'll find that the measurement should be .50 plus or minus .06. If any adjustment is needed to lengthen or shorten A, all you need to do is move the bushing. Move it in or toward yourself if you want to increase the crimp length. Move it out or away from yourself if you want to reduce the crimp length. Now that the machine's set up, all we've got to do is set the stop gauge to get the right crimp diameter. Again, you just hold the stop gauge lever open and jog the control valve lever to where the crimp jaws just make contact with the socket. Then set your stop gauge. Screw it down until it touches the pusher plate. All that's left now is to crimp the assembly. Great. Now take it out of the machine and measure the crimp diameter with the caliper gauge. Take it in the middle, here. Then look at the crimp data form. The crimp diameter for this hose ought to be 1.105 plus or minus .005. If the crimp is any larger than what the crimp data form says, unscrew the stop gauge just a little and recrimp the assembly. Do this until you got that diameter just exactly right. Now for a little maintenance on the machine. It's not real difficult. All you need to do is keep the crimp jaws and the crimp jaw head well lubricated. If they're not, you'll get extra friction on the jaws and crimp head. This will cause them to wear out a whole lot quicker than usual, and that's not good for anybody. And keep an eye on the other moving parts of the machine to make sure they're lubricated from time to time so they'll stay in good order too. And finally, change the hydraulic fluid every 3 to 6 months. This really depends on how often you use the machine. All that it takes to do this is to take off the drain plug and let the fluid drain out. Put the drain plug back in and refill the tank through the filler hole with hydraulic fluid. Now, how about we go through this one more time? First, you grab the hose you're going to use and find the hose number and dash size. Then, get the process specifications book, and remember, this is very important because it has the crimp data forms, which you'll need to crimp your hose. Then find out what length hose you need, mark it, and cut it. Remember to use a smooth, continuous motion when you cut the hose, and keep it behind the holding pins. Also, make sure the blade guard is down, and don't forget your goggles. Skive the hose down to the reinforcement wire. Then put the connection on the hose. Don't forget, don't use a mallet, table, or the floor to put the connection on because it might damage it. A little oil on the inside of the hose, a rotating motion in the direction of the reinforcement wire, and a little muscle is probably all you'll need. Next, put the thing in the machine and clamp the jaws down on it to make a mark and measure that distance, which is called A. Then set the stop gauge and crimp it. That's all there is to it. All you need to know now is how to maintain the machine, and that's easy. Just keep the jaws and the crimp head lubricated with Molykote GN paste, and make sure the other moving parts of the machine are kept lubed. And change out the hydraulic fluid every 3 to 6 months. That's all there is to it. It's pretty easy once you know how. All it takes is looking in the right place, and then it shouldn't take you too long to figure it out. It's not a very complicated piece of machinery to use. You just need to remember to keep the Strataflex process specifications book close at hand when you're going to crimp a hose. It'll give you all the information you need to know.